There are days that don't bring new information, but bring the laws that quietly govern life itself. Tomorrow, January 15, is not a day meant to be led by emotion. It is a day when justice begins to speak, softly, calmly, but in a way that cannot be avoided. If you are an Aries, and you're listening to this right now, pause for just a moment, because what's coming is not here to scare you. It's not here to threaten you. It's here to return what was delayed, what you endured in silence, what you carried for others, and every time you chose to stand upright, even when no one stood with you. This message isn't meant to intimidate you. It isn't here to add fear to your life. It's here to help Aries understand what is returning now and why, this time, you no longer need to run. In astrology, January 15 activates a very specific alignment. Mars, the ruling planet of Aries, comes face to face with Saturn and with universal justice. This is a moment when action, responsibility, and consequence can no longer be separated. Karma does not appear to punish you. It appears to confirm something essential. Have you lived in alignment with your values or not? And if you feel that you've endured long enough to deserve a fair turning point, allow yourself to leave a very gentle sign. I am ready to receive the destiny that is meant for me. Not to prove anything to anyone, but to align yourself with the quiet current already moving, already calling your name, Aries. Because what we're about to talk about next is a truth very few people are willing to say out loud. Why Aries is so often the one who carries first, and why the universe has never forgotten that. There is a deep misunderstanding. When people talk about karma, they think of punishment, they think of loss, they think of something being taken away. But from my years of studying charts, watching human behavior, and observing the cycles that repeat across lifetimes, I can say this clearly. Karma in astrology is not about punishment. Karma is simply the way the universe keeps life in balance. In both classical and modern astrology, karma has never been defined as a sentence. It is a consequence, the natural result of conscious choices we once made, even when we didn't yet have the words for them. And this is especially true for Aries. Aries does not create karma through bad intentions. You are not someone who schemes, keeps score, or manipulates behind the scenes. Your karma comes through action, and even more deeply, through action that was suppressed for too long. You are the first sign of the Zodiac. You were born to begin, to initiate, to step forward when no one else is ready. And because of that, you are often the one who carries first. You carry responsibility. You carry pressure. You carry burdens that were never truly yours. You are willing to take it on. You are willing to stand at the front, but you rarely say everything out loud. Not because you don't feel pain, but because you believe you can handle just a little more. Not because you don't recognize injustice, but because you trust that balance will eventually return. There were times you swallowed your words, just to keep the peace. Times you stepped back, not because you were wrong, but because you didn't want to hurt anyone further. Times you chose silence, even though you knew exactly what the truth was. No one saw those moments. No one recognized how much you restrained yourself. No one realized how quickly you forced yourself to grow up, but the universe did, and that is why Aries karma never arrives early. It always comes late, but when it comes with precision, because your karma is not about what you did wrong. It's about how long you did what was right, without asking for anything in return. In astrology, when Mars, the ruling planet of Aries, is restrained, suppressed, or placed in situations where action cannot be expressed, that energy does not disappear. It accumulates, it settles, and at a certain point, it must be released, so balance can be restored. That is the moment people call karma returning. But understand this clearly. Karma is not coming back to take something from you. It is coming back to return you to the position you were once pushed out of. It may be the truth finally being acknowledged. It may be a role being returned to you. It may be a relationship being forced to face a reality it has avoided for far too long. And very often, karma doesn't happen directly to you at all. It happens to those who once leaned on your silence, to escape responsibility for their own choices. This is a powerful lesson Aries needs to understand right now. Silence is not always virtue. Endurance is not always nobility. There are moments when standing upright is the most humane action of all. Not to hurt anyone, but to stop what's misaligned from continuing any longer. If you're listening to this and feel your heart sink just a little, it may be because you've been there. You've wondered why you're always the one carrying the hardest part. You've blamed yourself for being too strong, too direct, too full of energy. But here is the truth. Society doesn't need Aries because you are easy. It needs you because you are willing to begin what others are afraid to face. You are the path opener, and the one who opens the path always walks on the roughest ground. If any of this touches you, allow yourself to pause for a moment, and if you feel called to, leave a very gentle message in the comments. I allow myself to be fair to me, not for me to hear, but for you to say it to yourself, because what comes next matters deeply. We're about to move into a question few people ask honestly. Why is karma shifting for Aries right now? Why January 15 was chosen as the moment the universe speaks? And what changes when you stop carrying what was never yours to hold? Stay with me. The next part will reveal something very few people ever say out loud about Aries, and it may completely change the way you see yourself. There are times in life when things don't arrive like a storm. They arrive quietly, as if the universe gently places a hand on your shoulder and says, "It's time." For Aries, this moment is not random. It doesn't come because you did something wrong recently. It comes because of what you did right a long time ago. In astrology, Mars, the ruling planet of Aries, doesn't only represent action. Mars also holds the memory of action. Every decision you made, every time you stepped forward when others hesitated, every moment you said, "I'll handle it," instead of, "That's not my problem," none of that disappears. It is remembered, not by people, but by the rhythm that governs the universe itself. There were things you did right that no one ever acknowledged, times you stood for the truth and were labeled difficult instead, efforts you gave that went unseen because the outcome looked fine, so no one asked what it took for you to keep it that way. Mars records all of it, not with praise, but with time. And then Saturn arrives. Saturn doesn't come to comfort. Saturn comes to archive. It creates what I often call a timeline record. In that record are very clear entries. The times you took responsibility for others. The times you cleaned up consequences you did not create. The times you chose silence to keep the structure from collapsing. Saturn does not judge you as good or bad. It simply preserves the truth. And at a certain point, when you've gone far enough, long enough, deep enough, Saturn opens that record, not to punish, but to restore balance. This is why karma is returning for Aries now, not because you are weak, but because you are strong enough that you no longer need to prove anything. There is a great paradox in the Aries journey. When you still seek recognition, things remain unclear. When you stop needing acknowledgement, justice begins to move. Because real justice is never loud. It doesn't need an audience. It doesn't require dramatic apologies. It only requires that you stand in the right place. And you are already there. You may no longer be waiting for someone to admit they were wrong. You may no longer need an apology to close the past. You may no longer need anyone to return, to prove that you once mattered. And it is precisely in that moment, quiet, honest, almost invisible, that justice begins to move. You no longer need an apology to know your worth. And only then does fairness truly find a way into your life. Many people believe karma must arrive with drama, with collapse, with obvious consequences. But for Aries, karma often shows up as a shift in position. You don't need to do anything more. You only need to stop carrying what isn't yours. And when you stop carrying it, those who once relied on your strength to stay standing will be required to stand on their own. Not because you abandoned them, but because this is the work they must finally do for themselves. This is one of the deepest human lessons of this cycle. Carrying does not mean self-sacrifice. Responsibility does not mean erasing yourself. Aries holds a rare gift that very few people ever talk about: the ability to carry weight without turning yourself into a victim. You can take responsibility without resentment. You can step forward without needing credit. You can step back without bitterness. And because of that, when karma returns, it does not make you the wounded one. It places you in the role of the mature soul. If you're listening right now and feel a sense of calm settling in, it may be because you've touched this truth already. You no longer want to argue about right or wrong. You simply want everything to be placed where it belongs. If that resonates with you, leave a very gentle sign in the comments. You can write, "I allow myself to release what was never mine to carry," not for anyone else to read, but for you to hear yourself say it. Because what comes next is a deeper layer of Aries energy, a level only those who have walked through karma ever reach. A place where strength is no longer about moving the fastest, but about remaining steady without needing to fight. And this is where a new door opens. A new role, a form of power you were never taught, but always carried within you. The next part will help you understand why Aries is not only the one who opens the path, but the one who keeps that path from collapsing when no one else is standing there anymore. There is something essential Aries must understand right now. Not everything that returns comes back in the same form. Karma is not a door that only opens one way. It does not always arrive as loss or conflict or confrontation. Sometimes what returns is simply the truth. And truth, when recognized at the right moment, carries more weight than any punishment ever could. For Aries, the past does not return to hurt you again. It returns to be named correctly, to be seen in its rightful place, to restore the value you set aside too early. There were stories told incorrectly, roles that were quietly switched, efforts of yours treated as obvious, because you were strong enough, capable enough, steady enough to handle them. But truth has a very specific nature. It can remain silent for a long time, but when it appears, it does not require your voice. This is the first form of karma many Aries are stepping into now. Truth being acknowledged, not necessarily through apologies, not always through direct admissions, but through a growing realization that what once stood firm did so because you were there. You don't need to explain. You don't need to revisit the past. Simply stand in the right place and allow the truth to speak for itself. And then there is another form of karma, quieter but deeper, a position being returned. In astrology, when Saturn opens the timeline record, it does not ask who deserves more. It asks only one thing: who has carried long enough? There were positions in your life you were pushed away from, not because you lacked ability, but because you stepped aside, because you believed keeping the peace mattered more than standing where you belonged. But no position can remain empty forever. When the right person leaves, the absence becomes obvious. And at that point, the universe does not invite you back politely. It creates a space large enough that you cannot help but step into it, not to prove anything, but to restore balance. You don't need to fight to reclaim your place. If it belongs to you, it will always find its way back. And then there is a third form of karma, the kind many Aries don't like, but deeply need. Someone else must finally face their own choices. Throughout your past journey, you carried for others. You stepped in to manage consequences. You fixed mistakes that were never yours to make. But there comes a moment when this is no longer allowed, not because you've become selfish, but because if you continue, you prevent others from learning their own lessons. The justice of God or of the universe does not require your revenge. It doesn't ask you to do anything more. You are not the one who delivers judgment. You are not meant to teach anyone a lesson. Your only task is to stand in the right place and to stop lowering your worth so others don't have to take responsibility. When you stop doing that, those who once leaned on your strength to avoid their own decisions will have to face themselves, not because you pushed them into a corner, but because you are no longer standing in front of them. And that is when karma begins to work the way it was always meant to. You may see someone feel lost, someone forced to decide for themselves, someone with nowhere left to hide behind your silence. But remember this, you did not take away their safety. You simply returned to them the right to be responsible for their own life. This is a deeply human lesson. Love does not mean carrying for someone else. Kindness does not mean making yourself smaller. If you're listening right now and feel something unfamiliar inside, a sense of lightness, as if a weight has just been lifted, it may be because you're ready for this phase. You don't need to defeat anyone. The truth standing with you is enough. You don't need to stand above anyone. You only need to stand upright. And if there were moments when you felt you were treated unfairly, allow yourself to leave. A very small sign in the comments. If you ever felt you were shortchanged, leave a scale, not to reopen the past, but to acknowledge that you walked through it without losing yourself. Because what comes next is a very different layer of Aries energy. When truth has been acknowledged, when your position has been restored, when you are no longer carrying for anyone else, what happens to your strength then? And why the conscious silence of Aries is the very thing that forces the entire system to recalibrate. There is a truth very few people say out loud, yet almost every Aries has felt it. You are often the one who carries first, but the one who receives last. Not because you are weak, not because you are unlucky, but because you were born with a very rare kind of strength. A strength that doesn't make noise, that doesn't need proof, but always appears at the exact moment everything is about to collapse. Aries is the sign of beginnings, but no one tells you that the one who begins always carries the greatest risk. Before anyone dares to step forward, you already have. Before anyone is certain, you've already chosen. Before anyone is ready to take responsibility, you've already stood up. Your courage is not reckless. It is confrontational in the truest sense. You face what others avoid. You look directly at the problem. You say, "I'll handle it." While others are still weighing options, you may not be the most eloquent. You may not be the smoothest communicator, but you are present. And in the most critical moments of life, presence is worth more than words. Aries carries a powerful instinct for responsibility. When something goes wrong, you don't ask, "Who's at fault?" You ask, "What needs to be done now?" When consequences appear, you don't rush to blame. You look for solutions. And because of that, you've often been misunderstood, seen as too tough, labeled as someone who doesn't complain. And because you don't complain, others assume you don't hurt. But only Aries knows how many times you had to hold yourself together just to stay standing. How many times you told yourself to be a little stronger, even when you were already tired. How many times you refused to fall, because if you did, there would be no one left standing there. Society needs Aries in a very quiet way. Not always with gratitude, not always with recognition, not always named out loud, but always relied on. You are the initiator. You are the one who opens the path. But more than anything else, you are the one who stays responsible. all the way to the end of that path. Many people can start something. Very few have the strength to stay when the excitement fades, when consequences appear, when the original decision begins to demand its price. Aries stays in those moments, not because you have no other choice, but because you understand something very deep. If you don't remain standing, the weight of the system will collapse onto those who are weaker. This is a rare form of living ethics. It isn't taught in textbooks. It isn't rewarded with praise. Yet it is the foundation that allows society to function at all. Without people like Aries, many good things would never begin, and many consequences would never have anyone willing to take responsibility. You were not born to be applauded early. You were born to lay the foundation. Foundations are not glamorous. They sit underground. They carry weight. They are unseen. But when the foundation is strong, the entire structure can stand. Along your journey, there may have been moments when you asked yourself, why am I always the one carrying the hard part? Why, when everything is stable, does no one remember me? Why do I have to be this strong? If you've ever asked those questions, know this: they are not signs of weakness. They are signs of a soul that has traveled far enough to begin reflecting. And it is precisely then that karma begins to shift, not to take your strength away, but to return fairness to you. Because the one who always carries first must, at some point, be allowed to receive later, not as a flashy reward, but as the right position, as the quiet relief of knowing you no longer need to brace yourself. You may not be celebrated loudly, but you will be placed where you belong, a role no one else can fill, unless they have walked the road you already walked. If you're listening now and feel your eyes sting slightly, not from sadness, but from finally being seen, allow yourself to acknowledge that. You may leave a very gentle message in the comments. I've carried enough, not to complain, but to close an old chapter, because what comes next is a very different level of the Aries journey, a place where strength is no longer about carrying more, but about knowing when to set things down, and that is when you are no longer just the one who opens the path. You become the one who teaches the world what real responsibility looks like. Some lessons don't come from victory. They come from stopping at exactly the right moment. And the greatest lesson of this karmic cycle for Aries is not about how strong you are. It's about whether you dare to set your strength down. For a long time, you believed endurance was morality, that silence meant maturity, that suffering was the way to keep peace for everyone. You were not wrong to believe that. You have a kind heart. You didn't want others to be hurt by your directness. You didn't want to be the cause of collapse or conflict. But there is a truth that is hard to accept and necessary to say. Endurance is not always moral. Sometimes endurance only allows misalignment to continue longer. Sometimes silence is no longer compassion, but an unconscious permission for others to avoid responsibility. And at a certain point, the universe intervenes, not to judge you, but to protect a greater order. At times, Standing upright is the greatest lesson you can give another person. No raised voice, no arguments, simply choosing not to step forward on their behalf anymore. For Aries, this is a difficult lesson because your instinct is action, rescue, movement. You rush in when something is about to fall. Mars, your ruling planet, taught you this when you were very young. Act quickly, respond strongly, never abandon anyone halfway through. But in this cycle, Mars is teaching you something new. Action needs boundaries. Not every situation requires your intervention. Not every problem needs you to fix it. And not everyone needs to be rescued. This is not coldness. This is wisdom earned through experience. You cannot save someone who doesn't want to stand up on their own. You cannot grow on behalf of another person. And you are not meant to sacrifice your own survival just so someone else doesn't have to face their choices. This karmic cycle has arrived to teach you exactly that, not through words, but through exhaustion that has built up over time, through the quiet knowing that if you keep carrying, you will lose yourself. When you stop carrying for others, they finally begin to learn their own lessons. It's a simple truth. But if you're an Aries, you know how difficult it is to truly live it. Letting go is not abandonment. Letting go is returning responsibility to the right hands. When you no longer stand in the way, life will require the other person to step forward on their own. And that is real justice. You may see confusion. You may see disappointment. You may see blame. But remember this, that is not your fault. That is the growth. They delayed for too long. This lesson does not make you weaker. It places you where you belong. You don't need to prove that you're good. You don't need to sacrifice more to be recognized. You only need to live in alignment with your values. If you're listening now and feel something familiar in your chest, as if you've carried for someone far too long, as if you've wondered why you always have to be the strong one, then this lesson may be meant for you. If you're ready, leave one honest sentence in the comments. Have I been carrying for someone for too long? Not to blame anyone, but to look inward with truth. Because when you stop carrying, another door opens. A very quiet kind of Aries power, no longer fueled by fiery action, but by steady presence. That doesn't need confrontation. And for the first time in your life, you are not just the one who begins. You become the one who teaches the world what real responsibility looks like. And if you've stayed with me until this very moment, I want to offer you my deepest thanks. Not everyone has the patience to listen to a journey like this. Not everyone is willing to look directly at what they've carried, what they've endured, what they've survived in silence. Your presence here says something very clear. You are not searching for comfort. You are searching for truth. And here is the truth. Aries, karma has never been against you. January 15 is not a test. It is a confirmation, a moment where the universe looks at you and says, you've gone far enough. You are no longer placed in situations to see how much you can endure. You've proven that many times already. What's happening now is not a trial. It's an adjustment. an adjustment meant to return you to your rightful position, the position of the path opener, the position of the one who carries responsibility, the position of someone who no longer has to strain just to be seen. If at any point in this journey a sentence made you pause, if a moment reached you unexpectedly, that was not an accident. That was energy calling your name. And if you're ready to step into the place where justice is opening for you, leave a gentle confirmation below. I am ready to receive the destiny that truly belongs to me. A comment is not just words. It's how you align yourself with the right current. It's how you tell yourself, I am no longer standing outside my own values. If this message resonated with you, please like this video, share it, not to promote a channel, but to spread something the world deeply needs to remember. Justice always arrives when people are mature enough to receive it. And before we close, there is one last thing you should know. The Aries journey does not end here. When old karma closes, a new role begins. In the next video, we'll talk about a very quiet Aries gift, a power that only appears after you've walked through enough trials, an influence that doesn't need a voice, yet still causes the entire system to adjust to your presence. Stay with this journey. You were never meant to pass through life quietly. You were born to lay foundations for something stronger, not just for yourself, but for everyone who will walk behind you.